Hello YouTube, and this time we're going to be discussing giant monsters, starting from the beginning of giant monsters until today. So be prepared. We're going to be right back right after this, and then we're going to dive in to the giant monster genre. Hello YouTube, and today we are going to be discussing giant monsters from its origins until now. So here we go. We're going to start out with, and by the way, these giant monsters, this section is from the 1930s through the 1960s. So we're going to start out with the very first original giant monster movie, and that is King Kong. Yes, King Kong, the ape, the giant ape. And of course, we all know the history of King Kong. Everybody, I'm pretty sure, has seen a King Kong movie or two or three. They've made quite a few reboots, which we'll get into later. But right now, we're just going to discuss the original King Kong, that in I think it was 1932 or 33. And of course, everybody knows the story of King Kong. All these guys and one woman go to this island, and King Kong is there, and he ends up seeing the woman, and he falls in love, Beauty and the Beast type thing. And then, of course, they take him back to New York, and we all know what happens. King Kong goes up on top of the Empire State Building, and he's, doing all this stop animation stuff, which is really cool. Stop motion, not stop animation, but stop motion, I think that's what they call it. And, he's swatting at all the airplanes and stuff like that, and then, he decides, he realizes he's not going to be able to have the woman, so he takes a swan dive from the Empire State Building. So much for Kong. Beauty did kill the Beast. And then, after King Kong, of course, with the success of King Kong, they came out with Son of Kong. And that one didn't really have the success that King Kong did, but it was basically about another ape. And then after Son of Kong, they came out with another ape movie called Mighty Joe Young, and that one I didn't really care for too much. So, but if you want to watch them, more power to you. You can watch Mighty Joe Young or whatever. I did enjoy, though, however, I did enjoy the original King Kong. And then it seemed like after that, they kind of took a break from the giant monster movies in the 40s. And then when the 50s came, we had this big fear back in our country back then of the atomic bomb, because that was the big thing. People were building shelters, bomb shelters and all this. Everybody had the fear of the bomb. So, and what comes from the bomb? Mutations. And a lot of these movies are about, atomic threat. There's a couple that involve, there's one that actually involves aliens. And then there's, mad scientist stuff. So, the first one we'll talk about, which is a giant person. And this was not done because of the atomic threat. This was done because she was abducted by aliens and came back and grew and became Attack of the 50-Foot Woman. So, obviously, she was a woman 50 feet tall. So, she was she was a wife of a man who basically was a man whore. He cheated around and stuff, and, Harry was his name. So, she ended up, they thought she was nuts at first because she, was talking about the aliens and she was abducted and everybody thought she was, just drinking too much. But then, of course, she grew and grew and grew and, she finally got her man. But anyway, I'm not going to give the whole plot away. So, that is Attack of the 50-Foot Woman. Now, the next giant person movie we're going to jump into is a collection. It's two of them. And I just call them the Colossal Connection. And basically, it has two movies. The Amazing Colossal Man. And what happens with that is he accidentally, gets in the blast area of a nuclear bomb. And of course, instead of incinerating them like you think that it would do, it just messed up his metabolism, and he grew into a gigantic man. And so, so I guess you can say that is kind of radioactive. He became a giant guy. And then the sequel, The War of the Colossal Beast, is a sequel to it. So you'll have to watch the first one and then watch the second one if the first one interests you. That way, I won't be giving them away. Now we're going to get into the atomic part, and the first one is the first movie that we're going to get into is Beginning of the End. The Beginning of the End is it actually stars Peter Graves. And Peter Graves, as you know, was from Mission Impossible. A lot of actors and actresses got their start in some of these movies and went on to do other things, and we'll touch on them as we go along. But The Beginning of the End is about giant locusts. Or I guess some of them say grasshoppers, but giant locusts, and you can hear them make this creepy noise. And they're really good. It's a really good movie, The Beginning of the End. Of course, it's just one of those typical B, cheesy, giant monster movies, but, if you're into those, I recommend that you watch it. The next one is The Giant Claw. Now, this was not radioactive. The giant claw was a bird, and he was an ET, an extraterrestrial. He was a space bird, I guess. So he would fly around, and people wouldn't really be able to see him because he was able to block the radar signals and stuff. And all they would see is a shadow fly across the sky or whatever. So the giant claw is about a giant bird. Then we're going to get into a movie called Attack of the Crab Monster. And obviously, as you can tell by the title, that is about a giant crab. So, they made all kinds of giant movies like that, giant monster movies. Another one is a movie called Tarantula. Now, Tarantula was basically done by a mad scientist. He injected the spiders with stuff. So, and then one got out. And, of course, it grew to be a giant tarantula. And the one thing about Tarantula is, if you watch very closely toward the end of the movie, guess who made a very brief appearance? And that would be Dirty Harry himself, Mr. Clint Eastwood. Yes, Clint Eastwood was in a giant monster movie, and he played an airplane pilot, and he was getting ready to drop some, missiles on him or whatever he's going to do to the tarantula to kill it. But yeah, you can definitely tell that is Clint Eastwood. Now, another movie that does involve radiation is a movie called Them, which is about giant ants. And there are multiple giant ants. There's not just one, there's multiple giant ants. And they make this really high shriek noise, which is rather... You can always tell when the ants are coming because you can hear that noise. So that one I definitely recommend watching too, is Them. So, and as far as Atomic, we cannot forget the most popular atomic creature ever made. Anybody know what it is? And if you guess Godzilla, you would be right. That would be Godzilla. Godzilla was probably the most atomic, created monster of all time. And he was so popular that they have made over, right around 30 movies of Godzilla. Godzilla also spawned some spin-offs, believe it or not. There was Rodan, because they had Godzilla versus Rodan. Rodan was one. And, of course, Mothra. Can't forget Mothra, the giant moth. So Godzilla managed to, and he fought all kinds of really interesting monsters, later on in his movies. And I mean, they span from 1958, which, by the way, the 1958 one starred another actor that went on to be somebody else that we know, and that would be Perry Mason. So Raymond Burr starred in the original Godzilla. It was really weird watching him as, Perry Mason later on. It's like, dude, you fought Godzilla. You can win a court case. Come on. So Raymond Burr starred in that one. Then there was another one. It came from beneath the sea. And I assume that this is also radioactive. Maybe the radioactive affected him, or maybe he just was so far down that nobody knew. It doesn't really explain. But it came from beneath the sea is about a giant octopus. So, that was definitely a good movie. All those movies are good, so I definitely recommend that you watch them. And they've had some other ones, some I probably did not mention, and if I did, I apologize, but if you like them, I'm pretty sure you'll look them up and try to find some more. Now the 60s really started kind of getting away from the giant monster movies. Now there was, of course, all the Godzilla spin-offs and the Mothra and such, but another one that you may know of, it's a British movie, and it's called Gorgo, and it's basically like the British, British answering, say, hey, if the Japanese can do Godzilla, the British can do Gorgo. Well, Gorgo didn't really take off like Godzilla did. I think they only made one Gorgo movie. So, with that being said, that's just about it from the 60s, 30s through the 60s. So, and I know I didn't touch on all of them, and there's probably some that I did not mention, but, we got more decades to cover. So, I just listed, some of my favorite ones from the 30s through the 60s. So, if you're in the mood for, and most of them are black and white. Well, the first Godzilla was black and white, and then they had Godzilla's Revenge, that was black and white. But all the other Godzillas have been in color. Same way with Gorgo, he was in color, and Mothra and Rodan, all of them are in color. And the rest of them are pretty much black and white. So that takes care of the 1930s through the 1960s. Hello, YouTube. Now we are going to be going into the 1970s and 1980s. And we're going to start with Jaws. Jaws. The movie Jaws, and then Jaws 2 also counts as the 1970s. Of course, Jaws is about a giant shark, a great white, and it's the movie that freaked everybody out, and they didn't go to the beaches that year. So I bet you the Hollywood just loved the heck out of, or the beaches, the owners of the beaches just loved the heck out of Steven Spielberg. So they, it prevented them from going to the beach because, they were afraid of the great white shark. And of course, everybody knows the story of, Jaws. It actually is a really good movie, franchise for the most part. There was a couple that came out in the 70s and a couple that came out in the 80s. And when we get to the 80s, we'll cover the other Jaws movies. But, and of course, the original 1 and 2 starred Roy Scheider. I think I'm not sure. But yeah, he played Captain, Martin Brody. And of course, he hated the water, but of course he ended up going out into the water and, fighting the shark. So, with that being, Jaws, definitely one of the better giant monster movies too from the 70s, because it was a giant killer shark. Now another one that involved the ocean was not about a shark, but it was about a giant octopus. And that movie was called Tentacles. Unique name, huh? But Tentacles was about a giant octopus, and it starred Bo Hopkins. He was in it. Really good giant octopus movie. It's one that I always like to watch when it comes to stuff like that. So, Tentacles. Now, another one that came out in the 70s, and this is getting away from the ocean now. Another great one is a movie called Grizzly. And Grizzly is about a giant grizzly bear. And that one, oh, that is such a good movie. I mean, the first time I saw it, it's like, okay, this is going to be a must, keep seeing movie, watch it again. So, Grizzly is definitely worth watching. So, another one that is really good from the 1970s is a movie called Empire of the Ants. And Empire of the Ants stars Joan Collins, from Dynasty, Alexis Colby. It stars Joan Collins, and it has whether she's trying to swindle people into buying real estate on this island. And of course, it's inhabited by giant ants, and these giant ants didn't come from the atomic bomb or anything. They came from toxic waste that was dumped, and then it washed up, and of course it mutated them into giant ants, and they made the same sound as from the movie Them. So they sounded the same, so I guess they kind of used them as inspiration for the film. So another great 70s giant monster movie is a movie called Alligator. And Alligator is where this kid, he always wants a pet alligator, so that, his parents got him one. Well, then they ended up flushing it down the toilet, and of course it goes into the sewers of New York, and it mutates, and it becomes a gigantic alligator. And they did make a sequel to that, and I'm not really sure when it came out, but it wasn't nearly as good as the first one. So, if you watch the first one, you'll probably really love it. And then if you want to watch the second one, it's there to watch too, probably if you want to. So, another great movie from the 1970s is called Food of the Gods. And Food of the Gods is based upon an H.G. Wells story. I don't know if it was an actual novel or just a story, but it involves this farmer, and she has this chicken feed. And then they call it Food of the Gods because she found this stuff in the ground, and she mixed it in with her chicken feed, and it made the chickens really big. So yeah, there's a movie about giant chickens. So it doesn't focus on the chickens though, because it's got chickens, it's got wasps, but what it really focuses on are the giant rodents. I'm not sure if they're mice or rats, so I'm just saying rodents. So it's focusing basically on the rodents, and they're giant, and they attack and kill people. And I mean, it's the 70s were kind of getting out there a little bit with the giant monster movies. Another one, which I bet nobody ever thought that they would see, and it's called Night of the Lepus. And anybody know what a lepus is? In case you don't, I'll tell you. A lepus, are you ready for this? A lepus is a rabbit. So they made a movie about giant killer rabbits. And it actually stars, doesn't really star, he's in it, and that's DeForest Kelley, who most of you know is Dr. Leonard McCoy on Star Trek. So, that one is pretty interesting. But it is a good movie, even though I thought I'd never see a movie about giant killer rabbits. So, I think that's just about it from the 70s. So now I think we'll just move on to the 80s. We're doing 70s and 80s both in this video. And the 80s had a movie, of course, the two other sequels to Jaws, Jaws 3D and Jaws the Revenge. Now, Jaws Revenge is so-so, but Jaws 3D, I really like it. It has Louis Gossett Jr. in it, and they're in a under the water aquarium where people could walk through and see. And of course, they're in there, and then the giant shark gets loose. It comes back, and it's a good movie. It was actually meant to be in 3D, but Jaws 3D, that's what it's called, Jaws 3D. And it wound up being pretty good. They kind of had a little brief flirtation with 3D movies in the 80s. So, and another one that's really, really good from the 1980s is a movie called Q, the letter Q, The Winged Serpent. And it's about a giant bird that flies around New York and scooping up naked women sunbathing on the roof of their condos or whatever, or getting window cleaners, and it's just getting all kinds of people. It's kind of a gory movie, but it is a really good movie. If you like giant monster movies, it really does pay homage to the giant monsters from the 50s and stuff. So, there we go. Those are the movies from the 70s and 80s that I'm going to cover. And, I mean, they had some other good monster movies, but they weren't giants. And this one's focusing on, basically, the giants. So, I think that's pretty much it from the 70s and the 80s. So, there's some good movies, and a lot of them are pretty much available anywhere where you can watch So there you go. I hope that helps you out. We'll be back with 90s and today. Okay, we are to the last portion of this video, and we are going to be covering 90s and today. So we are going to, basically I'm going to do these a little different than I did the other ones. I'm going to put them off into not only the giant monsters, but what type of monsters, because they came out with tons of them in the 90s and today. So we'll start out with the Jurassic Park movies. Those are, dinosaurs, so I guess you can consider them as giant monsters. I think they made, 5 or 6 of the movies now. They finally polished it off just last year, I think, and it wound up being really good. So I definitely recommend, if you would like to watch them, watch any of the Jurassic Park movies. Watch them all, Jurassic Park, Jurassic World, all of them. I recommend. So now we're going to do a couple water, from the ocean type movies. A few of those. So this section is from the water, from the ocean, or just, coming from the water. And of course, what else would you start with? But one of the neatest franchises, I thought it was very unique. I really like them, and that's the Sharknado franchise. And they made 5 of those. And of course, they are giant sharks, and they actually get sucked up into tornadoes, and then they get dropped off, inland and stuff. So, they're very cheesy movies, but I really like the Sharknado movies. And then I like to call them, they have the Piranha. There's, and the reason I'm using these Piranha, because they updated the Piranha movies, and they wound up being giant Piranha. So, they have Piranha, and then Piranha 2D, or Piranha 3D, I think is what it was called. And, they're really good movies. I like them. But they had other Piranha movies too. They had Mega Piranha, and they had Piranhaconda, where they started mixing some of the giant movies, monsters together, like a piranha and an anaconda and stuff. So, and this is all from the water, and they also had a mini series, which was really good. It was made for TV, and it was called The Beast. And that was written by Peter Benchley. And it's also about a giant octopus. But it's a mini-series, and that one might be kind of hard to find, but if you can find it, or if you have it, such as I do, then I would recommend that you watch it, because that is a really good movie, The Beast. And like I said, they had all kinds of freak monsters too that came from the ocean, like like I said, Piranhaconda. They had Sharktopus. They had Mega Shark versus this, all these different monsters, and so they kind of mutated some of these monsters and combined them. Now we're going to get into snakes, and they had tons of giant snake movies. And of course, most notably would probably be the Anaconda series, where it was a giant anaconda. And they had 4 or 5 Anaconda movies. And all of them are really good. It's just seeing the big giant anaconda snake. But then they had other snake movies too, like Python. They had 2 of those. The first one was great. The second one was so-so. But the first one had that song, Stinky, Stinky Ashtray. It's a weird song, but I like it. I don't know why I like that song. And it's by a group called, I think their name is Damn, D-A-M-N. So if you ever really want to hear the song Stinky Stinky Ashtray, look it up. It's on Amazon Music and some other music services too. So you can always look it up. But they had other giant snake movies too. And let's see, one was, I think it was just called Giant Snake. I mean, they just had all kinds of giant snake movies. So you can't, I love the giant snake movies. I haven't seen too many. They've had, I haven't seen too many that are bad. I've seen, let's see, is it Python? It's either, I think it is Python that actually has Robert Englund, Freddy Krueger in it. So, the giant snake movies are really good. And the last section that we're going to get into are insects. Giant insects. So we'll start with the bees. And they had, the hive. And, they had a few movies about giant bees, which wind up, those are really good. Then they've also had, they didn't really have any giant ant movies in the 90s or today, but they did have giant wasps. They had movies about giant wasps. Those pretty much like the bee movies. They're just about giant insects, which wind up being good. The one that they had the most, I think, were giant spiders. They had, for example, Spiders 1, 2, and 3. They had Arachnid. Not arachnophobia, but arachnid, because it's, giant spiders. Arachnophobia is not giant, so we don't include that in this video. But they had one called Big Ass Spiders, which wound up being pretty good. They had Ice Spiders, which were giant spiders made of ice. They had Lavalantula, which basically was a fire spider. And, they've just had all different kinds of giant spider movies, which a lot of them are pretty good. Now, the one thing that I've always said, and this is stemming back even from the 1950s and up to now, is until they came out with this, it's like they never had a movie about giant mosquitoes. Well, now they got two movies about giant mosquitoes. One is called Skeeter. These pretty much came out right around the same time. One is called Skeeter, Skeeter, Skeeter. And the other one, of course, is just called Mosquito. So yes, they do have some movies about giant mosquitoes. But they've never, of course, never say never, because maybe somebody will watch this video and prove me wrong. But they've never had a movie about a giant lightning bug. So that would be interesting to see. And they also had, and this is not really, insect. So I guess we're pretty much done with the insect movies. Now we're going to go on, and I kind of missed a couple from the water, or at least one. It's called Crawl. And it was about a bunch of giant alligators. So I would definitely recommend watching Crawl if you haven't already seen it. And that's pretty much it from the, giant monsters. Because we covered from the water, we covered the sharks and the octopus and the piranha. And we covered all the insects. And they didn't really have any giant animal movies, like giant dogs or anything. They've had, movies about killer dogs, but they weren't giant, so that does not get included into this video. But they've had some interesting combos, let's put it that way, combining animals and stuff. So, but that, I think, is going to be pretty much it, you guys. So I hope this video helped, and hopefully you'll be able to, get some good ideas of movies that you want to watch. So, and we can't forget this one. And I should have mentioned this one in the 50s. But there was a movie from the 50s called The Giant Gila Monster. Gila Monster, but the G is silent. You know, a giant Gila monster. Well, back in the 2000s, a while back, they made one just called Gila. And it's basically a remake of the giant Gila monster. And they did a very good job with that one. It definitely paid homage to the original. Sometimes when they remake movies, they don't do that. They just kind of get way out there. But this one pretty much paid homage to the original. So, you got, the Gila monster. So, there you go. Alright, well, that's about it for all the giant monster movies. So, alright, everybody. I will talk at y'all in the next video. Not sure what it'll be about yet, but, we will see. So, alright. Oh, I did forget. Before I forget this, I did forget the King Kong movies, because they did make a couple of remakes of King Kong in the 90s through today. And one of them was the original. Peter Jackson was the one, from Lord of the Rings. He did King Kong, and it took place in New York. And of course, it kind of pretty much stayed true to the original King Kong, but it was a lot longer. I mean, it was like a 3.5-hour movie if you got the extended cut. But it still took place back in the time when the original King Kong did, which was really cool. They had all the old planes and stuff. But that was a good movie. And then they also, of course, Godzilla. He's made a lot of movies in the 90s and today. So, I mean, he's been Godzilla's been in movies from 1958 to pretty much current. So, whatever decade you want to watch, they got all kinds of Godzilla movies. And Mothra. So, and Gamera. I forgot about Gamera. And, the giant turtle. That's another one that started back in the late 50s, very early 60s, and went up to today. So if you want to see a movie about a giant turtle, knock yourself out. They're not too bad. So, alright everybody, that is going to be it. So, I just thought I would touch on a few that I kind of, didn't mention. So there you go. And I will see everybody on the next video. Alright everybody, if you did like the contents of this video, or like some of the other content on my YouTube page, please remember to leave a comment down below. Please keep it respectful. I hate to have YouTube, see YouTube block you. Sometimes they do stuff like that, which is kind of nice, because I try to keep my page as family friendly as possible. And stuff I have on here that's not family friendly, then of course I'll let them know. But so please, leave a comment below. And if you like this video, then remember to hit that like button so you can show that you liked it. And then, if you like what you see on my page, then subscribe to my YouTube page. All subscriptions are appreciated, and I'm just trying to build up my little YouTube page, so all subscriptions are appreciated. And then, remember to share my video if you think it's worth sharing, which I hope you do. But remember to share my video. I share it on Facebook, whatever social media app you so choose. That way the word will get out and maybe more people will see it. And then, for the very last thing, there's a little notification bell over there on the right. Bash that notification bell so that way whenever I go to upload YouTube videos, YouTube will be informed. And you'll say, okay, well, he's uploaded another video. Let's go see what it's all about. So remember to like, comment, subscribe, share, and bash that little notification bell. All right, everybody. Have a great day.